Welcome to Spooky Halls. On tonight's episode, The Devils Giftshop, Part 3, by Doom Dragon 682. As Jack made his way down the dark sidewalk, walking since he couldn't afford a car, he reminisced once more on how things came to be this way. He had never been very wise with money and had a bad habit of compulsively buying things he didn't even need on a whim and usually forgot how much money he had before he had made the purchase. He had been in debt a few times and never had enough to build up a savings account, and there weren't any well-paying jobs in town that he could qualify for. As deep as Jack was in his own thoughts, he suddenly felt himself stop, and it took him a moment to realize why he had stopped. He was standing in front of a creepy looking shop that he hadn't seen before, though when he thought hard about it, he recalled hearing someone talking about a strange shop that had recently opened. Jack looked over the black stone walls and the windows covered with a thick curtain and decided that this must be the creepy shop he had heard. The sign above the door read, "The Devils Giftshop." And Jack couldn't help but think the name was weird. Why would the devil own a gift shop in the middle of nowhere? But it was just a name, and there were plenty of places with weirder names. Jack eventually regained his train of thought and stepped into the shop. A bell above the door tingled to announce his arrival. The inside of the shop was just as, if not creepier than, the outside would lead you to believe. On his right was the checkout desk, with a fancy, ornate rug in the front of it. To his left were rows upon rows of shelves, piled high with various items. Jack wondered if the shop was open when a voice from behind suddenly caught him off guard. "Good evening, sir. May I help you?" Jack felt himself jump and instantly turned to face whoever spoke. He found himself facing an older man, probably late 30s or maybe even 40s, wearing a black vest with a white undershirt and blood-red tie. The man's piercing blue eyes almost seemed to glow as they looked Jack up and down, likely taking notice of his worn jeans and t-shirt. Though the man didn't look irritated or anything like that. Instead, he just looked curious and even amused. Jack forced a smile and held out a hand. "Hello, sir. My name is Jack. I just wandered into your store on a whim." The man grinned and shook Jack's hand. His hand was very warm, and he had a strong grip. Something about the way the man's felt in Jack's made him feel uneasy. "A pleasure to meet you, Jack. I am Mr. Memphis, owner of this little shop. Are you looking for anything in particular this evening?" Jack shook his head, and Mr. Memphis released his hand. As soon as he did, Jack unconsciously wiped his hands on his jeans. No, sir. I'm just browsing, if that's okay." Mr. Memphis nodded and waved to the shelves filling the old shop. "That's more than okay, young man. Many people find exactly what they're looking for in this shop, and I hope you do as well." Mr. Memphis disappeared into the store, and for a moment Jack thought he caught a glimpse of a much more sinister smile on the man's face. But he quickly pushed those thoughts from his head and wandered into the shelves of the store. As he walked, he saw a strange green mask that seemed to be carved from wood, an arrowhead with a sign advertising how it could give people the ability to see demons, and a bottle of some green slime with a logo reading "Monster Blood" in a wavy font. Jack looked over these items with great interest, and was even reaching for the arrowhead until something in the corner of his eye caught his attention even more. At the back of the store was a single long shelf with 5 items resting on it. A silver mirror, a small mannequin covered in strange carvings, a wallet made of a weird leather, a blank metal, and a silver locket shaped like a heart. Though all these items drew Jack's attention, the wallet seemed to call the hardest. He did need a new one. He had his current wallet since he was 14 and it was practically falling apart. He picked up the wallet and was surprised to find that it felt warm in his hands. But the shop was a bit warm, and it was summer, so he didn't think much of it. Inside, Jack saw it seemed to be a regular wallet, though it only had 2 slots for cards and a clasp shaped like a small mouth to keep it shut. Though he had never seen a wallet with a clasp before, it really looked more like a coin purse. As he looked it over and was startled by the shopkeeper once more. "Ah, I see you found my special collection. Those things really seem to be selling well." Jack started and quickly turned to face the man who stood a few feet behind him. How does he move so quietly? Jack thought to himself. I could have sworn I heard every floorboard creak when I was walking around. I guess since it's his shop, he knows how to move around without making a sound. Jack looked from Mr. Memphis to the shelf behind him. "This is your special collection? What makes it special?" Mr. Memphis seemed to grin wider, and Jack could have sworn he saw a bit of something red in his teeth, but quickly dismissed it. He probably had a snack recently. "Well, young man, these items are special because they are rare and unique, each in its own special way. Every item on the shelf was made long ago, and is the only one of its kind in the world." Jack couldn't help but raise an eyebrow at that. Sure, the items on the shelf seemed unusual, but he felt that saying that they were one of a kind was a bit of an overstatement. As though sensing Jack's skepticism, the shopkeeper spoke once more. "I can see you don't believe me, sir, and I completely understand you. But take the wallet you hold in your hands, for instance. Though it may seem like a simple leather wallet, it's truly special. An old story says that whoever possesses that wallet will have great wealth for their entire lives." Jack perked up at that. Great wealth? Certainly sounded very promising, and before he could stop himself, he spoke. "So how much for the wallet?" Mr. Memphis turned to hide a smirk. "Unfortunately, young man, the wallet is very expensive, and I'm not sure you can afford it." Jack felt his heart sink into his shoes as the man named his price. It was more than Jack had seen in his entire life. "That's steep." Mr. Memphis nodded. "Well, yes, but remember, it is a wallet that grants great wealth. It would make sense it would cost an arm and leg, as they say, but I understand if you need time to think it over. Maybe you'll find something you like better." And with that, he simply turned and walked away. Jack wasn't sure how long he stood there in silence, staring at the wallet in his hands. As so deep in thought, he didn't even notice Mr. Memphis leaving. He debated internally on what he should do for a while before his body made a decision for him. He slipped the wallet into his pocket and ran out of the store so fast he almost knocked over a young woman outside. He ran so fast he missed the look Mr. Memphis had on his face, a smile that nearly split his face in two. Jack was out of breath by the time he made it home, locking his door and running to his bedroom. He sat on his bed and placed his head in his hands. He sat and thought over his actions. What did I just do? Why did I even do it? I've never stolen anything in my life. Should I return it? Jack stood, intending to do just that, but suddenly he felt a wave of exhaustion roll over his body. He swayed for a moment before falling back into the bed. His eyelids had never felt so heavy as he resolved to return the wallet first thing in the morning. He drifted off into unconsciousness. Jack didn't normally dream, and when he did, it was usually just random nonsense that he hardly recalled. But that night was different. That night he had a nightmare. In it, he had everything he could desire. An amazing house and car and anything else he wanted. But he wanted more. No matter how much he had, it was never enough. It just wanted more and more. He wanted everything. Then a sudden pain tore up his arm. He looked down and saw a round, fleshy creature attached to his arm and sucking it dry. He watched as his arm shriveled up, turned gray, then black before crumbling into dust. Then the creature started doing the same to his leg. Jack desperately tried to tear it off, but the creature didn't budge an inch. He only succeeded in tearing up his own leg. As the monster fed, it grew as well. Soon it was as big as a purse, then a sleeping bag, and soon it was so big that it could swallow Jack whole. The creature lunged at Jack to do just that when he suddenly jolted awake. Jack jolted awake in a cold sweat. His breath was quick and panicked, and it took a moment for him to calm himself. By then, he had all but forgotten his nightmare and made his way to the kitchen for breakfast, chalking his nightmare up to guilt. But just as the thought crossed his mind, he nearly dropped the milk in his hand as he remembered the wallet he had stolen. Jack made his way to the room and picked it up, intending to march back to the store and return it, when a thought interrupted him. Why should he return it? Mr. Memphis had gone on and on about how rare and expensive this wallet was. But it was just a weird-looking wallet. How rare and expensive could a weird old wallet be? Not only that, but the price the old man wanted for it was ludicrous. It was borderline highway robbery. Eventually, Jack settled on keeping the wallet. It would teach the old man a lesson about trying to sell junk at a ridiculous price. Jack decided to go out later that day for lunch. When he placed his order and he reached into his pocket, he was surprised when he found himself pulling out the stolen wallet. He was just about to cancel his order when he noticed something sticking out of the wallet. Opening it, he found a $20 bill inside. Jack was surprised, but had never been one to look a gift horse, or in this case, a wallet, in the mouth. He handed over the bill and took his food, smiling to himself on his way out. This is great, he thought. This wallet just makes money. With this, I'll never have to worry about cash ever again. With that, Jack made his way home, thinking about all the things he could do with the wallet. Jack spent a few days figuring out how the wallet worked. He figured out that the wallet would produce any amount of money at night, but only when he slept. The amount varied between $20 to several hundred, although the higher amount, the more tired he was in the morning. A connection he never made. He also found that the wallet would only produce money when he slept. Anytime he tried to stay up and see how the wallet created the money, it just never produced any. At some point, he even left a credit card inside and discovered it had $500 deposited in it out of nowhere. Jack would usually spend the money as soon as it appeared, and the wallet just seemed to make more and more money. He hardly noticed the small cuts on his arms and legs when he awoke each morning that seemed to increase in number with the more money he spent. Jack just chalked these up to bug bites and bought some bug spray. When Jack woke up one morning, he found he couldn't lift his right arm. Confused, he reached over with his left and turned on the lamp to find that his arm was practically skin and bones. It was thin and brittle like a mummy arm. He freaked out and attempted to get out of bed, only to fall face first on the floor. He looked around, confused, and soon found the culprit. Jack's right leg had suffered the same way as his arm had, although there was something different. The wallet was latched onto his thigh like a leech. Jack grabbed it and pulled, but that only seemed to make it latch onto his leg even harder. He managed to drag himself to a standing position and look out the window. He was shocked to see it was night out. Desperate to get the leech off, he decided to get a knife from the kitchen. Jack limped to the bedroom door as fast as he could, but froze when he threw it open. Rather than seeing the hallway of his home, Jack stood in the entrance of a familiar shop. He was confused and felt himself being pulled forward until he stood in front of the desk. He had almost gathered his thoughts and recovered from his confusion when he heard a voice from behind him, a deep, distorted voice, filled with malice and amusement.
Sorry to drag you here on such short notice, but I'm afraid my schedule got a bit muddled up and I don't have time to wait.
Jack spun around as best as he could and ended up falling to the ground. He looked up at the figure that spoke as his vision swarmed bloodlust. The thing that stood just a foot from him was not the same man who stood in the shop a few days ago. But Jack understood that what he was the true form of Mr. Memphis. He had grown several feet taller. 2 small horns stuck out of the top of his head from his slick back hair. His teeth were like thin knives. His fingernails had grown and darkened into talons, and Jack found himself staring into the blood-red eyes of this thing and understanding that he would die here. Jack's vision slowly began to fade, and he had just enough time to wish he had never set foot in the shop before he was gone. Mr. Memphis looked at the shriveled corpse that rested on the floor in front of him and chuckled.
I just put down a rug to catch any mess, and of course, the next customer I have is kind enough to not leave a mess.
He stepped forward and pulled the fat, squirming creature from the remains of the body and took it to the back shelf and placed it with the others. When he came back, he picked up the shriveled corpse and placed it in a glass display case with a sign and price tag. He always wanted a mummy to sell. This has been another episode of Spooky Halls. If you've enjoyed the video, please like it and subscribe. Thank you and good night.